Disclaimer: the information in this video is not meant to replace any official information and is only meant as extra help for any person who may have lacked it. We encourage people to look for more information on the sources that we provide and externally with experts. Hello, lovely listeners. I'm Elle, and today I will be your host for today's episode of Safety Podcast. I'm currently joined by my co-hosts S.
Hi.
And T.
Hello.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about gender identities, misconceptions, what they are, how they are expressed, and more. I'll list out some misconceptions for you guys. One is only male and female genders exist / gender exists in a binary. The next is gender is the same as sex. People choose to be transgender or genderqueer / have a gender identity other than their biological sex. Transgender behavior / youth can be cured. Transgender people are sexual offenders / pervasive. Transgenderism is a mental illness. Society is pressuring people to be trans or have identities outside of the binary. And people who medically transition will regret it or often detransition. So the next section. So what are the facts about gender and different gender identities? Let's start by talking about the concept as a whole. What is gender? Gender is defined by the World Health Organization to be the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. Unlike sex, gender is believed to exist in the spectrum, as it is based on the experience of one's sex and is highly dependent on societal standards. While certain aspects may be seen as feminine in some cultures, they can often exist to represent masculinity in others. Similarly, different cultures represent different aspects as denoting gender or being genderless. This is widely susceptible to change over time.
I have a question. So for our listeners, what are some examples of the different cultures or the cultures that have thing being one thing being depicted as feminine and the other being depicted as masculine?
One common example that I often see being brought up is kilts and skirts, because they're awfully similar. But in one culture, kilts represent a masculine object or like a masculine form of clothing, whereas skirts are often seen in the West as being more feminine.
Okay, thank you.
So what is the difference between gender and sex? Again, citing from the World Health Organization, gender interacts with but is different from sex, which refers to the different biological and physiological characteristics of females, males, and intersex persons, such as chromosomes, hormones, and reproductive organs. Gender and sex are related to but different from gender identity. Gender identity refers to a person's deeply felt internal and individual experience of gender, which may or may not have corresponded to the person's physiology or designated sex at birth. Biological sex is not to be confused with gender identity. In order to differentiate the two, the terms AMAB, assigned male at birth, and AFAB, assigned female at birth, exist. Gender is often defined on the basis of masculine to feminine traits. Gender identities and pronouns. As gender is often regarded to be a spectrum, there doesn't have to be a particular label for a person's gender. However, some common labels are genderqueer, someone whose gender does not fall with the traditional concepts of male or female. This could imply the exploration of gender identities or a preference to remain without a specific label. Cisgender, a person whose gender matches their biological sex. Transgender, a person whose gender does not match their biological sex, typically matching that of the opposite sex. For example, you have a biological male who identifies as a female. Non-binary, a person whose gender does not lie with a traditional male and female. Agender, an individual who identifies themselves as lacking gender. As with the rest of the information we provide, this should not be considered to be an extensive list, but a slight selection of examples. Many other gender identities exist outside of the ones depicted or explained in this presentation. We denote gender through our use of gendered language. These include a variety of terms such as he, she, they, ze, sim, and more. Some people may prefer to be addressed by their names rather than any particular pronouns. Inversely, people aren't required to use one single set of pronouns only and might prefer to go by multiple, such as she, they, or not have preference at all, being called he, she, they, or any other pronouns. The only way to address a person properly is to ask what their pronouns are, as appearance and other observable factors are not always an indication of gender.
I would like to add something as well. So it's very, very important to call somebody by their pronouns because it's a sign of respect and based on their life. But yeah, guys, just call people by their pronouns, and you should do it because it's
It's a
decent.
kind thing to do.
Yes, it's a very kind thing to do. And besides, for all you know, that person may be struggling with their gender, and you calling them by their preferred pronouns will just make their day. So,
yeah. So, what do people with different gender identities do to address them? Often, the feelings of incongruence between someone's gender and sex is defined by gender dysphoria, which is characterized by psychological distress. American Psychiatric Association. However, it doesn't always have to be demonstrated by mental distress and can, in some cases, be addressed without it. Several things can be done to express one's gender identity. Clothing is one aspect that helps people feel at ease with the incongruencies between their physical bodies and their gender identity. In some cases, such as transgender, people that are biologically one sex and want to transition to a different gender, medical intervention and surgeries can be performed. This varies from person to person and age. Some people might be confident about their gender identity from a very young age and may want to undergo puberty blockers, officially approved by the FDA since the 1990s, as a means to prevent the incredible distress that the wrong puberty, quote unquote, may cause them. People may also want to transition further later in life through sex reassignment surgeries, mostly known as top and bottom surgeries or hormone replacement therapy, HRT. Some people may not require surgeries or hormones to feel comfort between their sex and gender identity. In order to get approval for these types of treatments, a person has to visit and get approval from multiple therapists. So, as mentioned before, why is it important to support different gender identities? Well, having different gender identities than a person's biological sex can often be a traumatic experience, as a person struggles to represent themselves with a body that they do not feel comfortable with. Trans people are twice as likely to consider and attempt suicide than any other subset of the LGBTQ plus community. And nearly 43% of all transgender people have attempted it, with 2 out of 3 reporting self-harming recently. Center for Suicide Prevention. For this reason, it is important to respect and support others who go through these experiences. Asking for someone's preferred pronouns and using them can make a big difference. Is there any other questions or comments?
Um, I do have a question about like how many therapists would someone need to go to in order to get like approval?
I've actually talked about this with the LGBTQ research center that we have um, locally, and they often say that 2 to 3 different therapists. I think often is 3 in order to get HRT. But in order to get surgeries, you have to have gone to several meetings. I think it's about like 20 or 21 in order to get approval for that level of surgery.
Does it cost a lot of money?
Yes, that's often one of the sad parts
Oh,
as well of being a trans person. It's the fact that it's a very expensive process to go through and also one that takes a lot of time.
that sucks.
Mhm. It's actually one of the most debated topics in the community because a lot of people bring up the idea that people can get enhancement surgeries without needing a therapist, whereas other people that are like transgender want to express a different gender identity through modifications can't.
Yeah, I get that point of view honestly, because like I was thinking about it and I was just like, why would they need to go through multiple therapists? I'm sure that like if somebody is looking for this surgery, they've been thinking about it for a very long time because it's a very life changing surgery. I
Yeah,
from my point of view.
no, I agree. It's often a very scary surgery because it comes with a lot of implications and possible um, issues. And so it's important to consider. It's important to, I think, from my point of view, it's important to support people going through it, but it's also important to see a therapist. That being said, I don't know that it should be that difficult to get such treatments, especially expensive.
Yeah. I I know that there's been a lot of like controversies in the world of regarding like kids going through like the hormone with the HRT, sorry, medicine and also like the surgeries of it.
Mhm.
So my question is like I don't know, I guess I just wanted to say that there's been a lot of controversies about that. But again, I just feel like if the kid like knows because we've seen examples of people who've changed like people who've gone through it when they were very young and they seem very happy like Jazz the trans woman that like had her a what's the word reality show.
I agree. I actually added the point of puberty blockers being officially approved by the FDA in the 1990s because one of the common debates is that we shouldn't allow children to transition as a large percentage of young children um, will have a feeling of being a different gender identity, but they'll grow out of it. However, this isn't applicable to a lot of children. There's a lot of children who don't grow out of it, especially once they enter puberty and start seeing the different effects that it has on their body. And puberty blockers are actually used for people or for children that are undergoing puberty at a younger age than they should be. And so there's a controversy in that why shouldn't trans kids be able to use puberty blockers when other kids are allowed to? And also on the comment of surgery, you can't have a surgery until you're 18. So you do have to be an adult. That being said, you can often get cosmetic surgeries by the age of 18 without having to see a therapist. And so that is an issue.
I didn't know that. I thought that like if your parents gave you permission, you could do it.
No, it's not allowed. I mean, I'm sure you could get it through unofficial means, which is actually one of the aims of a lot of centers, which is to provide these resources easier in easier manner than to obtain drugs or other enhancement surgeries and unofficial means that could often harm you more. T, do you have any other questions?
Not at the moment.
That's good. So then that will conclude our section in our episode for today. Thank you for listening. And if I'm not wrong, this might be the last episode of the podcast. So thank you for listening to the podcast as a whole. We appreciate your time. Bye bye.